Imagine this: a devoted wife, finally pregnant after years of heartache, discovers her millionaire husband's shocking betrayal, not just with her best friend, but in ways that unravel a web of lies, fraud, and even murder. What starts as a heartbreaking affair explodes into a high-stakes revenge thriller, where she hires a PI, exposes dark secrets, and brings down an empire. But just when justice seems served, new threats emerge from the shadows, setting up an even bigger battle. Stick around as I dive into this gripping 10-chapter saga of empowerment, deception, and ultimate payback. You won't believe the twists. If you're hooked already, hit that like button. Drop a comment with your wildest prediction. Share this with a friend who loves drama, and subscribe for more epic story breakdowns. Let's get into it. Sarah Mitchell sat in her white BMW outside the medical center, rain pelting the windshield as tears streamed down her face. The ultrasound photos scattered across the passenger seat should have been the happiest moment of her 38 years. After 3 years of fertility treatments, endless doctor visits, and crushing disappointment month after month, she was finally pregnant. The tiny black and white image showed a perfect little being that would become her first child. But instead of joy, Sarah felt like her world was crumbling around her. Her phone buzzed with another text message that made her stomach turn. The message was meant for David, her husband of 10 years, but it had been sent to her phone by mistake. "Can't wait to see you tonight, darling. Jessica." Jessica, her best friend since college, her maid of honor, the woman who had held Sarah's hand through every failed pregnancy test and fertility treatment, the woman who was supposed to be planning Sarah's baby shower. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up the ultrasound photo. How could this be happening now, when everything should have been perfect? She thought back to this morning when she had woken up early to surprise David with the news. He had already left for his morning run, something that had become a daily routine since his tech startup had gone public 3 years ago. She had planned to tell him over breakfast, maybe even frame the ultrasound photo as a gift. Instead, she had found hotel receipts in his gym bag. The Ritz-Carlton, the Four Seasons, the St. Regis. All dates when David claimed to be on business trips to Seattle or San Francisco. But Sarah remembered those dates clearly because she had been dealing with her fertility specialist appointments alone, telling herself that David's work was just demanding. The pregnant wife betrayed scenario was something she had seen in movies, read about in books, but never imagined would happen to her. Sarah had given up her promising marketing career 8 years ago when David's company started taking off. She had been the supportive wife, managing their home, hosting business dinners, being the perfect partner for a millionaire husband. She had trusted him completely. Sarah's phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. David's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, babe, how did the appointment go?" His voice sounded normal, loving even. How could he sound so caring when he was cheating on her? "It went fine," Sarah managed to say, her voice barely steady. "David, can we talk when you get home tonight?" "Of course. Is everything okay? You sound upset." The irony of his concern made Sarah want to scream. Instead, she took a deep breath. "I'm just emotional. Pregnancy hormones. You know." "Right, of course. I love you. Sarah, I'll be home by 7. We can order from that Italian place you like." After hanging up, Sarah stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her brown hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite the tears. She looked like the successful wife of a tech executive, living in their $1 million home in the suburbs of Austin, Texas. But inside, she felt like everything she had built her life around was a lie. The drive home took 20 minutes through their affluent neighborhood, where every house looked like something from a magazine. Sarah had once felt proud pulling into their circular driveway, proud of the life they had built together. Now the house felt like a beautiful prison. Inside, Sarah walked through the room she had carefully decorated over the years. The kitchen with its marble countertops where she made David's coffee every morning. The living room where they had hosted dinner parties for his business associates. The guest bedroom that she had secretly hoped would become a nursery. In David's study, Sarah noticed his laptop was still open. She had never snooped before, had never felt the need to. Trust had been the foundation of their marriage. But now, with Jessica's text message burned into her memory, Sarah found herself looking at the screen. David's email was open, and Sarah saw a folder labeled JM Personal. Her heart pounded as she clicked on it. Inside were dozens of emails between David and Jessica dating back 6 months. The subject lines made Sarah feel sick. Last night was incredible. When can we meet again? Sarah doesn't suspect anything. Sarah's legs gave out, and she collapsed into David's leather chair. She scrolled through the emails, each one more devastating than the last. They talked about hotels, about weekend trips, about how David was handling the Sarah situation. They discussed her fertility treatments like they were an inconvenience, something that was getting in the way of their relationship. In one email from 3 weeks ago, Jessica had written, "What happens if she gets pregnant?" David's response made Sarah's blood run cold. "We'll deal with that when it happens. Sarah's been trying for years. The chances are pretty slim." But Sarah was pregnant, and according to these emails, David and Jessica had been planning a future together, a future that didn't include her. Sarah printed out the most damaging emails and put them in a folder. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the papers. She had to think clearly, had to decide what to do next. But first, she needed to understand the full scope of David's betrayal. She went to their bedroom and searched through David's dresser. In the back of his sock drawer, she found a credit card statement she had never seen before. The charges told a story that made her sick. Expensive dinners for 2 at restaurants she had never been to. Jewelry purchases from Tiffany and Cartier that she had never received. Hotel rooms in cities where David claimed to be on business alone. The most recent charge was for a weekend at a luxury resort in Napa Valley. The same weekend David had told her he was at a boring tech conference in Silicon Valley. According to the credit card statement, he had spent over $3,000 on spa treatments, wine tastings, and a couple's massage. Sarah sat on their bed, surrounded by evidence of her husband's affair with her best friend, and felt her world completely collapse. The pregnancy that should have been the happiest news of her life now felt like a complication in someone else's plan. She thought about all the times Jessica had comforted her after failed fertility treatments, all the times she had encouraged Sarah to keep trying. Had Jessica been hoping Sarah would never get pregnant so she could have David to herself? The sound of the garage door opening made Sarah quickly put everything back where she had found it. She heard David's footsteps coming up the stairs and realized she wasn't ready to confront him yet. She needed time to think, to plan, to decide how to handle this devastating betrayal. "Sarah, I'm home," David called out cheerfully. "I'll be right down," she replied, surprised by how normal her voice sounded. Sarah looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. She had to pull herself together, had to act normal until she figured out what to do. But as she looked at her reflection, she made a promise to herself. David and Jessica thought they could destroy her life and get away with it. They thought the pregnant wife who had been betrayed would just quietly disappear. They were about to learn how wrong they were. As Sarah walked downstairs to face her cheating husband, she didn't know that her discovery was just the beginning. Hidden in David's car was another pregnancy test, one that didn't belong to her. The betrayal was deeper than she could possibly imagine, and the revenge she was already planning would need to be far more strategic than she realized. The perfect life she thought she was living was indeed shattered, but Sarah Mitchell was about to discover strength she never knew she had. Sarah woke up the next morning feeling like she was living in someone else's life. David was already gone for his morning run, and she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how many mornings he had actually spent with Jessica instead of exercising. The best friend mistress scenario felt like something from a soap opera, not her real life. She picked up her phone and opened Instagram, something she did every morning while drinking her coffee. But today, Jessica's posts looked different. Sarah scrolled through photos from the past 6 months with new eyes, and her heart sank with each image. There was Jessica at the Ritz-Carlton bar, the same hotel where David had stayed according to the receipts. Jessica showing off a Cartier bracelet that looked identical to the jewelry purchase on David's secret credit card. Jessica posting from a spa weekend in Napa Valley with the caption, "Sometimes you need to treat yourself," posted the exact same weekend David claimed to be at his conference. How had Sarah missed these obvious signs? She realized that Jessica had been flaunting the affair right in front of her, hidden in plain sight on social media. The luxury affair scandal had been playing out online while Sarah remained completely oblivious. Sarah got dressed and decided to drive to Jessica's downtown penthouse. She needed to see for herself what was really going on. Jessica lived in one of Austin's most expensive buildings, supposedly funded by her job as a marketing consultant. But Sarah was beginning to wonder if David had been helping with those payments. As Sarah pulled into the visitor parking garage at Jessica's building, she saw a familiar car. David's black Tesla was parked in a spot marked "Reserved for Unit 3205, Jessica's unit. Sarah felt sick. It was 7 in the morning. David should have been on his run, but instead he was upstairs with her best friend. Sarah sat in her car for 45 minutes, fighting waves of nausea that she couldn't tell were from pregnancy or emotional trauma. Finally, she saw David emerge from the elevator, looking relaxed and happy. He was carrying a coffee cup and checking his phone, probably making sure Sarah hadn't texted him. When David's car pulled out of the garage, Sarah felt like she might vomit. The pregnancy symptoms were bad enough, but combined with the shock of witnessing her husband leave her best friend's apartment, her body was struggling to cope. Sarah drove home in a daze, trying to process what she had seen. By the time she pulled into her driveway, she had made a decision. She was going to confront David directly. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe this was all a horrible misunderstanding. That evening, Sarah waited until David had settled into his home office with a glass of wine. She took a deep breath and walked in, carrying the printouts of his emails with Jessica. "David, we need to talk," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He looked up from his laptop with a smile. "Of course, babe. What's on your mind?" Sarah placed the emails on his desk. "I found these." David's face went completely white as he recognized his own words printed on the pages. For a moment, he said nothing, just stared at the evidence of his affair. Then, to Sarah's complete shock, he started crying. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," he sobbed, putting his head in his hands. "I never meant for this to happen. It got complicated." Seeing her husband break down made Sarah's anger waver. This was the man she had loved for 10 years, the man she had married, the man whose child she was carrying. Maybe they could work through this. "How long has it been going on?" she asked quietly. 6 months, David admitted. "It started as just friendship after her divorce. And then, I don't know how it happened. Sarah, I've been feeling so much pressure with the business, and Jessica understood that world in a way that, I'm sorry, that came out wrong." Sarah felt a flicker of hope. David seemed genuinely remorseful. Maybe the midlife betrayal story didn't have to end their marriage. "Are you willing to end it with Jessica and work on our marriage?" Sarah asked. "Yes," David said immediately. "I'll call Dr. Martinez right now and book us a couples therapy session. Sarah, I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I want to fix this, especially now that we're having a baby." Sarah's hand instinctively went to her stomach. She hadn't told David about the pregnancy yet, but somehow he knew. "How did you know?" she asked. "I saw the ultrasound photos on the counter when I came home yesterday." "Sarah, this baby is a gift, a chance for us to start over and build the family we've always wanted." For the first time in 24 hours, Sarah felt like maybe everything would be okay. David was crying, apologizing, promising to change. He had immediately agreed to therapy and was talking about their future together. Maybe the pregnancy would save their marriage? The next morning, David called Dr. Martinez's office and booked their first couples therapy session for that afternoon. Sarah spent the day feeling cautiously optimistic. She even called her sister in Dallas to share the pregnancy news, though she didn't mention discovering David's affair. At 3 o'clock, Sarah and David sat in Dr. Martinez's comfortable office. The therapist was a woman in her 50s who specialized in marriage counseling and had excellent reviews online. Sarah felt hopeful as they began talking about their relationship and the challenges they had been facing. David, can you tell me what led to the affair? Dr. Martinez asked gently. David took Sarah's hand. I've been under enormous pressure with the business going public. Sarah has been trying to get pregnant for years, and I felt like I was failing her every month when it didn't happen. Jessica was going through her divorce and understood the stress I was under. One thing led to another. Sarah squeezed David's hand. I understand work has been stressful. I should have been more supportive. This is not your fault, Sarah, Dr. Martinez said firmly. David made a choice to have an affair instead of communicating his feelings to you. That's on him, not you. David nodded. She's absolutely right. I take full responsibility. I've already told Jessica that it's over between us. Sarah felt relief wash over her. David had ended the affair. They were in therapy. Everything was going to be okay. That's when David's phone rang. I'm sorry, I thought I had it turned off, David said, reaching for his phone. It's Jessica. I should probably take this to make sure she understands that it's over between us. Dr. Martinez frowned. David, this is supposed to be a safe space for you and Sarah. Can the call wait? It'll just take a second, David said, already answering the phone. Hello? Sarah watched her husband's face change as he listened to whoever was on the other end. His eyes widened, and he stood up from the couch. What are you sure? How is that possible? David's voice was getting louder. David, please hang up, Sarah said, feeling her anxiety spike. I have to go, David said into the phone. We'll talk about this later. He hung up and turned to Sarah and Dr. Martinez with a look of complete panic. I'm sorry, but we have to cut this session short. There's been an emergency. What kind of emergency? Sarah asked. But deep down, she already knew it had something to do with Jessica. Jessica is pregnant, David said quietly. She just got the test results back from her doctor. The room went completely silent. Sarah felt like all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Jessica was pregnant too. Her best friend was carrying her husband's baby. I have to go handle this, David said, already grabbing his keys. Sarah, we'll talk about this at home tonight. David, you cannot leave this therapy session to go deal with your mistress's pregnancy, Dr. Martinez said firmly. Your wife needs you here right now. But David was already walking toward the door. I'm sorry, but this changes everything. I have to figure out what to do. Sarah watched her husband leave her in the therapist's office to go comfort the other woman who was carrying his child. The false hope she had felt that morning shattered completely. This wasn't just a simple affair that could be fixed with therapy. This was a complete betrayal that involved another pregnancy, another potential family. Dr. Martinez handed Sarah a box of tissues. I'm so sorry, Sarah. This is not how marriage counseling is supposed to go. Sarah wiped her tears and looked at the therapist. What do I do now? You take care of yourself and your baby, Dr. Martinez said gently. And you remember that David's choices are not a reflection of your worth as a wife or as a person. As Sarah drove home alone, she realized that the man she had married, the man she had trusted with her life, was capable of far more deception than she had ever imagined. The best friend mistress luxury affair scandal was just the beginning. If Jessica was really pregnant with David's baby, Sarah's life was about to become far more complicated than she had ever dreamed possible. She had no idea that Jessica's pregnancy claim was actually a lie, designed to manipulate David into leaving Sarah. The web of deception was far more complex than anyone realized, and Sarah was about to discover that her fight for her marriage was really a fight for her entire future. Sarah sat in the parking lot outside Dr. Martinez's office, hyperventilating as rain created dramatic patterns on her windshield. Her hands gripped the steering wheel as she tried to process what had just happened. David had left their marriage counseling session to comfort Jessica about her supposed pregnancy. The man who claimed to love Sarah had abandoned her in her moment of greatest need. The pregnant wife financial betrayal felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from David. I'm sorry about leaving therapy. We need to talk tonight. This is complicated, but we can figure it out together. Complicated, that's how David described potentially fathering children with two different women at the same time. Sarah wanted to throw her phone across the parking lot, but instead she started researching divorce attorneys on Google. If David thought the situation was just complicated, he was about to learn exactly how complicated a millionaire marriage could become when it fell apart. The first attorney Sarah called was Margaret Torres, whose website specialized in high net worth divorces. Margaret's bio mentioned that she had handled several cases involving tech executives and was known for protecting women's financial interests when their husbands tried to hide assets. Mrs. Mitchell, I can see you tomorrow morning at 9, Margaret's assistant said. Please bring any financial documents you have access to, including bank statements, investment accounts, and information about your husband's business interests. That evening, Sarah spent hours gathering every financial document she could find. What she discovered made her feel sick. David had been systematically moving money out of their joint accounts and into accounts she had never seen before. Their savings account, which should have had over $200,000, now contained less than $50,000. When David came home at 11 o'clock, Sarah was waiting for him in the kitchen with a pile of bank statements spread across the table. We need to talk about money, Sarah said without looking up at him. David loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch. Sarah, I know today was overwhelming, but we can work through this. Jessica and I, it's not what you think. Really, because what I think is that my husband has been having an affair with my best friend for 6 months, got her pregnant, and has been stealing money from our joint accounts to fund his double life. David's face went pale. I haven't been stealing anything. I've been making investments to protect our future. Investments? Sarah stood up and grabbed the bank statements. Is that what you call the $30,000 you transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands? Or the $50,000 you moved to a Swiss bank last month? How did you find those? David asked, his tone shifting from apologetic to defensive. I'm not as stupid as you think I am, Sarah replied. I also found the credit card you've been using to pay for your luxury affair with Jessica. $20,000 in hotel rooms, restaurants, and jewelry that I've never seen. David sat down heavily in one of their kitchen chairs. Sarah, you don't understand the pressure I'm under. The SEC has been investigating some of our business practices. I had to move money to protect it from potential legal issues. What kind of legal issues? Sarah felt her world tilting again. David, what aren't you telling me? It's nothing serious, David said quickly. Just some questions about how we handled our IPO. Standard stuff for a tech company. But I wanted to make sure our personal assets were protected just in case. Sarah stared at her husband. In 10 years of marriage, she had never known him to be involved in anything legally questionable. But then again, she had never known him to be capable of having an affair either. So you moved our money to offshore accounts without telling me, while spending thousands of dollars on another woman, and you expect me to believe this is all to protect our future? I was going to tell you about the accounts once the investigation was over, David said, and the affair with Jessica, that's over now. She's scared about being pregnant and doesn't know what to do. I'm trying to help her figure out her options. Her options? Sarah felt rage building in her chest. What about my options? David, what about our baby's options? David looked confused. Our baby Sarah. What are you talking about? Sarah realized she still hadn't told David directly about her pregnancy. In all the chaos of discovering his affair, she had never actually had the conversation she had planned. I'm pregnant, Sarah said quietly. I found out yesterday at the doctor's appointment. That's what I wanted to tell you last night. David's face went through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, and something that looked almost like panic. You're pregnant too, he asked. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. I have the ultrasound photos and blood test results to prove it. David put his head in his hands. This is unbelievable. Jessica is 8 weeks pregnant, and you're... How far along are you? About 6 weeks, Sarah said. Which means you got both of us pregnant at almost the same time? The silence that followed was deafening. David seemed to be calculating something in his head. and Sarah realized with horror that he was probably trying to figure out which pregnancy was more convenient for him. David, I need to know right now. Are you planning to leave me for Jessica? I don't know, David said honestly. Sarah, I love you, but this situation is incredibly complex. Jessica's pregnancy changes everything. My pregnancy should change everything too, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I'm your wife. We've been trying to have a baby for 3 years. I know, and I'm happy about your pregnancy, David said. But Jessica is scared and alone. Her divorce just finalized, and she doesn't have the kind of financial security that you have. Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. Financial security, David. You've been draining our accounts while spending thousands on Jessica. What financial security are you talking about? You have this house, and you'll always be taken care of. David said, Jessica has nothing. I have nothing. Sarah corrected him. This house is in your name. The cars are in your name. The bank accounts are in your name. I gave up my career to support yours, and I have been financially dependent on you for 8 years. If you leave me, I'll have nothing. For the first time, David looked uncomfortable with the reality of Sarah's situation. She could see him realizing that the financial security he thought she had was actually just her dependence on him. Sarah, I would never leave you with nothing. We can work out a fair arrangement. A fair arrangement? Sarah laughed bitterly. Like the prenup I signed 8 years ago that gives me almost nothing if we divorce. David's silence confirmed what Sarah had suspected. The prenup she had signed when they got married, back when David's company was just a startup, and she thought they would be together forever, heavily favored David. At the time, she hadn't cared because she never imagined they would divorce. Now she realized how naive she had been. I'm going to see a lawyer tomorrow, Sarah announced. Sarah, please don't do anything rash, David said. Let's take some time to think about this situation logically. Logically, Sarah gathered up the bank statements. The logical thing would have been for you not to have an affair with my best friend while I was struggling with fertility treatments. The logical thing would have been for you not to get another woman pregnant while trying to have a baby with your wife. The logical thing would have been for you not to steal money from our joint accounts to fund your double life. I never stole anything, David said defensively. Then put the money back in our joint account, Sarah challenged him. If it's really just investments to protect our future, then move it back where I can access it too. David's hesitation told Sarah everything she needed to know. He had no intention of giving her access to the money he had hidden away. The millionaire marriage she thought she was living in was actually a financial betrayal that had been going on for months. As Sarah walked upstairs to their bedroom, she heard David on the phone in his study. She couldn't make out the words, but she knew he was calling Jessica. He was probably telling his pregnant mistress about Sarah's pregnancy, figuring out how to manage 2 pregnant women at the same time. Sarah lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and feeling her baby growing inside her. This child deserved better than a father who saw pregnancy as a complication to manage. Sarah deserved better than a husband who viewed her as a financial burden instead of a partner. Tomorrow, she would meet with Margaret Torres and start learning about her legal options. Tonight, she would grieve the end of the marriage she thought she had and start planning for the war she never wanted to fight. What Sarah didn't know was that David was already 3 steps ahead of her. The phone call he was making wasn't just to Jessica, it was to his attorney, discussing how to use Sarah's pregnancy against her in a potential custody battle. The financial betrayal was deeper than Sarah could imagine, and David's plans for their future were far more sinister than she realized. Sarah spent the night tossing and turning, her mind racing with questions about her future. When she woke up, David was already gone, supposedly for an early morning meeting. Sarah suspected he was actually with Jessica, planning their next move. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Her eyes were red from crying, her skin pale from stress, but there was something new in her expression: determination. The pregnant wife revenge story was just beginning. Sarah was done being a victim. She spent the morning getting ready for her appointment with Margaret Torres like she was preparing for battle. She chose a navy blue suit that made her look professional and confident, styled her hair in a sleek bob, and applied makeup to hide the evidence of her sleepless night. If she was going to fight for her future, she was going to look the part. Margaret Torres' law office was located in a downtown Austin high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The waiting room was elegant but not ostentatious, decorated with tasteful artwork and comfortable leather furniture. Sarah felt intimidated but determined as she checked in with the receptionist. "Mrs. Mitchell, Ms. Torres will see you now," the assistant said, leading Sarah down a hallway lined with awards and legal certifications. Margaret Torres was exactly what Sarah had hoped for, a woman in her early 50s with silver hair, sharp eyes, and an aura of competence that immediately put Sarah at ease. Her office was impressive without being showy, with law books lining the walls and a large oak desk positioned to take advantage of the city view. "Please, have a seat," Margaret said, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from her desk. "I understand you're dealing with a difficult situation involving your husband's infidelity and potential financial irregularities." Sarah took a deep breath and told Margaret everything: the affair with Jessica, the hidden bank accounts, the offshore investments, the dual pregnancies, and the prenup she had signed 8 years ago. Margaret listened without judgment, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Mrs. Mitchell, I have to be honest with you," Margaret said when Sarah finished her story. "The prenup you signed is going to be a significant challenge. Your husband's attorney did an excellent job protecting his assets." Sarah's heart sank. "So I have no options." "I didn't say that," Margaret smiled. "Prenups can be challenged under certain circumstances, particularly if there's evidence of fraud, duress, or if your husband failed to disclose significant assets when you signed it. The offshore accounts you discovered suggest he may have been hiding assets even back then." Margaret explained that Sarah's first step should be gathering as much evidence as possible about David's financial deception and affair. "We need to document everything: bank transfers, credit card statements, hotel receipts, communications between your husband and Jessica. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case becomes." "How do I gather evidence about things I don't have access to?" Sarah asked. "That's where a private investigator comes in," Margaret said. "I work with several excellent PIs who specialize in marital infidelity and financial fraud cases. They can legally obtain information that would be impossible for you to access on your own." Margaret gave Sarah the contact information for Marcus Rivera, a former FBI agent who had started his own private investigation firm specializing in high-net-worth divorce cases. "Marcus is the best in the business," Margaret assured her. "He's worked on cases involving tech executives before, and he understands how to trace hidden assets." That afternoon, Sarah met Marcus Rivera at a small coffee shop near her neighborhood. She had expected a private investigator to look like something from a detective movie, but Marcus was a well-dressed man in his mid-40s who could have easily passed for a business executive himself. He had kind eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately made Sarah feel comfortable. "Mrs. Mitchell, I understand you're dealing with a complex situation involving both infidelity and financial deception," Marcus said after they had ordered coffee. "Before we discuss working together, I want you to understand what I can and cannot do for you." Marcus explained that he could legally investigate David's financial activities, document evidence of the affair, and uncover information that might be relevant to Sarah's divorce case. He could not break any laws or engage in activities that might compromise Sarah's legal position. "What I can do is give you the truth about what your husband has been doing," Marcus said. "Sometimes the truth is exactly what clients expect, and sometimes it's much worse than they imagined. Are you prepared for either possibility?" Sarah thought about the question seriously. "I need to know the truth, whatever it is. My baby and I deserve better than being lied to and manipulated." "Good," Marcus said. "That's the attitude that wins cases like this." They discussed Marcus's fees, which were substantial but not unreasonable given his expertise and reputation. Sarah used one of the credit cards that still had her name on it to pay his retainer, knowing that David would probably see the charge but not caring anymore. "I want to warn you about something," Marcus said as they prepared to leave. Cases like this often reveal information that goes beyond simple adultery. When wealthy men start hiding assets and manipulating family relationships, there's usually a deeper pattern of deception. I've seen cases where affairs were just the tip of the iceberg. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of deeper patterns? Business fraud, tax evasion, sometimes even criminal activity, Marcus said. I'm not saying that's what we'll find with your husband, but I want you to be psychologically prepared for the possibility that his betrayal might be more extensive than you realize. As Sarah drove home, she felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. She could turn around and try to salvage her marriage, accepting David's affair and Jessica's pregnancy as part of their new reality. Or she could jump off the cliff into the unknown, fighting for her rights and her future, even though she had no idea what she might discover about the man she had married. That evening, David came home with flowers and a bottle of sparkling cider, apparently trying to make a romantic gesture despite the chaos in their lives. Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation last night, David said. I want to work things out between us. Jessica's pregnancy doesn't have to change our marriage. Really? Sarah asked, accepting the flowers but feeling nothing. And how exactly do you plan to manage being a father to two babies, born around the same time, to two different women? We'll figure it out, David said confidently. Lots of men have children from previous relationships. This doesn't have to be different. Except Jessica isn't from a previous relationship, Sarah pointed out. She's from a current relationship that happened while you were married to me. David's expression hardened slightly. Sarah, I'm trying to make this work, but if you're going to be difficult about this situation, it's going to be harder for all of us. Sarah felt something shift inside her. David was actually trying to make her feel guilty for being upset about his affair and his mistress's pregnancy. The manipulation was so blatant that it almost made her laugh. You're right, David, she said calmly. This situation is going to be very difficult, especially for you. David looked confused by her response, but Sarah didn't elaborate. Let him wonder what she meant. Tomorrow, Marcus would begin his investigation, and Sarah would start learning the truth about the man she had married. If David wanted to play chess, she was finally ready to show him that she wasn't just a pawn on his board. That night, Sarah lay in bed listening to David take a phone call in his study. She couldn't hear the words, but she could hear the urgent tone in his voice. Something was happening that David didn't want her to know about, and Sarah was beginning to realize that her husband's secrets went far beyond a simple affair with her best friend. The private investigator affair evidence would soon reveal just how deep David's deception went, and Sarah was about to discover that she had been living with a stranger for 10 years. The luxury divorce preparation was just the beginning of what would become the fight of her life. Sarah woke up to her phone buzzing incessantly with notifications. At first, she thought it was just her usual morning emails and social media alerts. But as she picked up her phone, her stomach dropped. She had 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and hundreds of social media notifications. The first text message was from her sister Lisa in Dallas. Sarah, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Call me immediately. Confused and increasingly panicked, Sarah opened her Instagram app. Her heart stopped when she saw that someone had tagged her in dozens of posts. The posts contained intimate photos and private messages between David and Jessica. Photos that Sarah had never seen before. Messages that were far more explicit than anything she had found on David's computer. The social media affair scandal was now public, and Sarah's private humiliation was being broadcast to everyone she knew. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through the posts. Someone had created an anonymous account called Austin Affair Exposure and had systematically shared evidence of David and Jessica's relationship. There were screenshots of text messages where they discussed their sexual encounters, photos of them together at expensive restaurants and hotels, and even intimate pictures that made Sarah feel sick to her stomach. But the worst part was that Sarah herself was being discussed in these messages. David and Jessica had apparently found her fertility struggles amusing, joking about her desperation to get pregnant and mocking her for being clueless about their affair. In one particularly cruel exchange, Jessica had written, "Poor Sarah, trying so hard to get pregnant when her husband would rather be with a real woman." Sarah ran to the bathroom and vomited, unable to tell if it was morning sickness or emotional trauma causing her physical reaction. As she knelt on the cold tile floor, she heard David's footsteps racing up the stairs. "Sarah, Sarah, we need to talk." David's voice was panicked as he burst into the bathroom. "Get away from me," Sarah said weakly, still kneeling beside the toilet. "Sarah, I don't know how those messages got leaked, but we need to figure out damage control," David said. "This could ruin everything for both of us." Sarah looked up at her husband in disbelief. "Damage control, David. You and Jessica made fun of my fertility treatments on social media for everyone to see. You called me desperate and clueless while having an affair with my best friend. And you're worried about damage control." "Those messages were private," David said defensively. "Someone violated our privacy by sharing them." "Your privacy?" Sarah stood up on shaky legs. "What about my privacy? What about my dignity? Everyone I know now knows that my husband thinks I'm a joke." Sarah's phone rang, and she saw Margaret Torres' name on the screen. She answered immediately. "Sarah, I'm assuming you've seen the social media posts," Margaret said without preamble. "I need you to screenshot everything before the posts get taken down. This is actually excellent evidence for our case." "Evidence?" Sarah asked, feeling confused. "Margaret, this is humiliating. Everyone I know has seen these messages." "I understand this is painful," Margaret said gently, "but these posts prove that your husband has been systematically deceiving you and hiding assets. Some of these messages reference business deals and financial transactions that we can use to challenge your prenup." As Margaret spoke, Sarah realized that someone had leaked this information deliberately. The timing was too perfect, and the messages were too comprehensive to be accidental. Someone wanted David and Jessica's affair to be public, and Sarah had a suspicion about who might be behind it. After hanging up with Margaret, Sarah called Marcus Rivera. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell," Marcus said, sounding unsurprised to hear from her. "I imagine you've seen the social media posts." "Marcus, did you leak those messages?" Sarah asked directly. "I cannot and would not illegally hack into anyone's private communications," Marcus replied carefully. "However, I may have discovered that certain information had already been obtained through legal means and was being held by parties interested in exposing the truth." Sarah understood. Marcus couldn't directly leak the information due to legal and ethical constraints, but he had somehow arranged for it to become public through other channels. "The question now," Marcus continued, "is how you want to handle the public attention. We can either try to minimize the publicity or use it to our advantage." Before Sarah could respond, David's business partner, Andrew Chen, called David's phone. Sarah could hear Andrew's angry voice from across the bathroom. "David, what the hell is going on? The board is furious about these social media posts. This is exactly the kind of publicity we don't need right now with the SEC investigation ongoing." Sarah's blood ran cold. SEC investigation. This was the first she had heard about any investigation being ongoing, rather than just potential. David had lied to her again about the severity of his legal problems. "Andrew, I can explain everything," David said, walking into his study and closing the door. Sarah followed him and stood outside the door, listening to his conversation. "The SEC investigation is bad enough without adding a sex scandal to the mix," Andrew was saying. "David, you need to get this under control immediately, or the board is going to vote you out as CEO." "It's not a sex scandal," David protested. "It's a private matter that someone leaked maliciously." "Private matter, David. You've been embezzling company funds to pay for your affair. The SEC already knows about the offshore accounts, and now there's public evidence connecting those accounts to your personal expenses. You've screwed us all." Sarah felt like the world was spinning around her. David hadn't just been hiding marital assets. He had been stealing from his own company to fund his affair with Jessica. The millionaire husband downfall was happening in real time, and Sarah was watching it unfold from the inside. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sarah, This is just the beginning. Your husband destroyed my family too. We need to talk. Catherine. Sarah stared at the message, trying to process what it meant. Someone named Catherine claimed that David had destroyed her family. How many women had David hurt? She Googled David Mitchell SEC investigation and found several news articles from business publications that she had somehow missed. The articles described an ongoing federal investigation into David's company for securities fraud, insider trading, and misappropriation of funds. The investigation had been going on for 8 months, long before Sarah discovered the affair. One article mentioned that federal investigators were particularly interested in David's personal financial transactions and his use of company funds for non-business purposes. Sarah realized that David's affair with Jessica wasn't just marital infidelity. It was potentially federal fraud if he had used company money to pay for their relationship. As Sarah read more articles, she discovered that David's company stock had been declining for months due to the investigation. The millionaire lifestyle she thought they were living was apparently funded by illegal activity that was about to collapse. Sarah's phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Martinez, the marriage counselor. Sarah, I saw the news about your husband online. Dr. Martinez said, I want you to know that my office is a safe space if you need someone to talk to during this difficult time. Dr. Martinez, is it normal for someone to use marriage counseling as a way to manipulate their spouse? Sarah asked. What do you mean? David seemed so eager to go to therapy, but now I'm wondering if he was just trying to control the narrative about our marriage problems. Dr. Martinez was quiet for a moment. Sarah, I can't discuss the specifics of our session, but I will say that some people do use therapy as a manipulation tool rather than a genuine attempt to improve their relationship. If you suspect that David wasn't being honest during our session, that tells you something important about his character. After hanging up, Sarah sat in her kitchen and tried to process everything she had learned in the past few hours. Her husband was under federal investigation for embezzling money. He had used that stolen money to fund an affair with her best friend. The affair had been exposed on social media, humiliating Sarah publicly. And now someone named Catherine was claiming that David had destroyed her family too. Sarah was beginning to realize that David's betrayal went far beyond a simple affair. He was potentially a criminal who had been using her as cover for his illegal activities. The pregnancy that should have been the happiest news of her life was now complicated by the possibility that her child's father might go to prison. But Sarah was no longer the naive housewife who had discovered the affair just a few days ago. She was angry, and she was ready to fight. If David thought he could destroy her life and walk away unscathed, he was about to learn how wrong he was. The public humiliation that David had caused was about to become his own worst nightmare. Sarah was done being a victim, and with Marcus and Margaret's help, she was going to make sure that David paid for every lie he had told and every life he had destroyed. The affair consequences and wealth loss were just the beginning of David's problems. Sarah was about to show him what real revenge looked like. Sarah sat in the emergency room at Austin Presbyterian Hospital, her hand pressed protectively over her stomach as she tried to calm her racing heart. The stress from the morning's revelations had triggered severe cramping and spotting, sending her into a panic about her baby's safety. She had driven herself to the hospital, too afraid to wait for an ambulance and too angry to call David for help. The pregnancy complications from betrayal stress were exactly what Dr. Martinez had warned her about. Sarah's body was rebelling against the emotional trauma she had endured, putting both her and her baby at risk. Mrs. Mitchell. A nurse called her name, and Sarah followed her to a private examination room. The nurse took her vital signs and noted Sarah's elevated blood pressure and rapid heart rate. I'm 6 weeks pregnant, Sarah explained, and I've been under a lot of stress. I started cramping and spotting this morning, and I'm scared something is wrong with my baby. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the on-call obstetrician, entered the room with a kind smile and gentle demeanor that immediately put Sarah at ease. She was a woman in her 40s with graying hair and the sort of calm confidence that made patients feel safe. Let's take a look and see how your baby's doing. Dr. Reeves said, preparing the ultrasound equipment. Can you tell me about the stress you've been experiencing? As the ultrasound began, Sarah found herself telling Dr. Reeves everything: the affair, the public humiliation, the SEC investigation, the financial betrayal. It felt good to talk to someone who had no connection to her situation and could listen without judgment. Your baby looks fine, Dr. Reeves said, pointing to the strong heartbeat visible on the monitor. But your stress levels are definitely affecting your body. Pregnancy complicated by severe emotional trauma can be dangerous for both mother and baby. Dr. Reeves printed out several ultrasound photos and handed them to Sarah. I want you to stay for monitoring for a few hours to make sure your blood pressure stabilizes. Is there someone you can call to be with you? Sarah looked at the ultrasound photos of her healthy baby and felt tears welling up in her eyes. My husband is under federal investigation for embezzling money, and he's been having an affair with my best friend. I don't really have anyone to call. What about family, parents, siblings? My sister lives in Dallas, and my parents are in Florida. I don't want to worry them until I know for sure that everything is okay. Dr. Reeves sat down beside Sarah's hospital bed. Mrs. Mitchell, I've been practicing obstetrics for 15 years, and I've seen many women go through difficult pregnancies complicated by relationship problems. What I've learned is that stress this severe doesn't just go away on its own. You need support, and you need to prioritize your health and your baby's health above everything else. As Dr. Reeves spoke, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from David. Where are you? Your car isn't in the driveway, and you're not answering the house phone. Sarah showed the message to Dr. Reeves. He doesn't even know I'm in the hospital. He's probably with Jessica planning damage control for their social media scandal. Do you want to tell him where you are? Dr. Reeves asked. Sarah thought about it for a moment. No. I want to see how long it takes him to figure out that his pregnant wife is missing. Dr. Reeves smiled slightly. That tells me you're stronger than you think you are. Hold on to that strength. You're going to need it. Sarah spent the next 4 hours in the hospital, hooked up to monitors that tracked her blood pressure and the baby's heartbeat. During that time, she received dozens of text messages and phone calls from David, each one more frantic than the last. Sarah, please call me back. I'm worried about you. Sarah, Marcus Rivera called looking for you. What is that about? Sarah, answer your phone. This isn't funny. Sarah, I called your sister and she doesn't know where you are. Where the hell are you? Sarah ignored all of David's messages, but she did call Marcus Rivera back. Mrs. Mitchell, I hope you're somewhere safe, Marcus said when he answered. I have some significant updates about our investigation, but I'd prefer to discuss them in person. I'm in the hospital, Sarah said. Stress-related pregnancy complications. Can you come here? I'll be there in 20 minutes, Marcus replied without hesitation. When Marcus arrived at the hospital, he carried a thick folder of documents and had a serious expression on his face. Dr. Reeves allowed him to visit since Sarah had listed him as someone she wanted to see. How are you feeling? Marcus asked, genuinely concerned about Sarah's health. Better now that my blood pressure is down, Sarah said. What did you find out? Marcus opened his folder and pulled out several sets of documents. Sarah, your husband's situation is much worse than we initially realized. The SEC investigation involves not just his current company, but 2 previous businesses that failed under suspicious circumstances. Marcus explained that David had a pattern of starting tech companies, taking them public, embezzling funds, and then moving on to new ventures when the companies collapsed. The offshore accounts Sarah had discovered were part of an elaborate money laundering scheme that had been going on for over a decade. There's more, Marcus continued. I did some research on David's first wife, Rebecca, who died 8 years ago. Her death was ruled accidental, but there were some irregularities that were never fully investigated. Sarah felt cold despite the warm hospital room. What kind of irregularities? Rebecca had recently discovered David's affair with his business partner's wife. Marcus explained. She had hired a divorce attorney and was planning to expose David's financial fraud as part of their divorce proceedings. 2 weeks later, she died in a car accident. Are you saying David killed his first wife? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. I'm saying there are enough questions about Rebecca's death to warrant further investigation, Marcus replied carefully, especially given what we now know about David's pattern of behavior with women who threaten to expose him. Sarah thought about Jessica's supposed pregnancy and felt a chill run down her spine. Marcus, do you think Jessica is really pregnant? That's actually one of the things I wanted to discuss with you, Marcus said. I've been monitoring Jessica's activities, and there's no evidence that she's been to a doctor or purchased pregnancy-related items. I think she may be using a fake pregnancy to manipulate David. As Marcus spoke, Sarah realized that Jessica's pregnancy claim had been perfectly timed to disrupt Sarah's marriage counseling session with David. It was almost as if Jessica had been waiting for the right moment to drop that bombshell. But if Jessica isn't really pregnant, why would David be so concerned about her? Sarah asked. Because Jessica knows about David's illegal business activities, Marcus explained. She's not just his mistress, she's his accomplice. Her ex-husband owns patents that David needed for his company, and Jessica helped David manipulate those patent deals. Sarah felt like she was learning about a completely different person than the man she had married. David wasn't just an unfaithful husband. He was a criminal who had been using Sarah as cover for his illegal activities for years. Sarah, there's something else you need to know, Marcus said gently. I believe David is planning to leave the country. I found evidence that he's been making preparations to transfer money to untraceable accounts and obtain false identification documents. He's planning to run away, Sarah asked. I think he knows the SEC investigation is about to result in criminal charges, Marcus explained. And I think he's planning to disappear before that happens, leaving you to deal with the legal and financial consequences. Sarah looked down at the ultrasound photos of her baby. David was planning to abandon her and their child to avoid prosecution for his crimes. The man she had loved and trusted was willing to let her face the consequences of his illegal activities while he started a new life somewhere else. What can we do to stop him? Sarah asked. We need to move quickly, Marcus said. I'm going to contact the FBI about David's plans to flee, and you need to decide whether you want to cooperate with federal authorities to help build a case against him. Sarah thought about the question seriously. Cooperating with the FBI meant potentially sending her child's father to prison, but not cooperating meant allowing David to destroy more lives and escape justice for what he had done to her and other women like Rebecca. I'll cooperate, Sarah said firmly, but I want protection for my baby and myself. As Marcus left the hospital to make contact with federal authorities, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace despite everything that was happening. For the first time since discovering David's affair, she felt like she was taking control of her situation instead of just reacting to David's manipulations. Dr. Reeves returned to check on Sarah's vital signs and was pleased to see that her blood pressure had stabilized. You can go home this evening, but I want you to follow up with your regular obstetrician in a few days, she said. Thank you for everything, Sarah said. You helped me realize that I need to prioritize my baby's safety above everything else. That's exactly right, Dr. Reeves replied. Your baby needs a strong, healthy mother who can protect them from harm. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for doing whatever it takes to keep your child safe. As Sarah prepared to leave the hospital, she realized that her fight wasn't just about getting revenge on David anymore. She was fighting for her baby's future, and that gave her a strength she had never known she possessed. The hospital drama and affair consequences had shown Sarah that she was capable of surviving anything David could throw at her. Now it was time to make sure he faced the consequences of his actions, and that no other woman would have to endure what she had been through. Sarah returned home from the hospital to find David pacing frantically in their living room, his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw her walk through the door, he immediately hung up and rushed toward her. Sarah, where the hell have you been? I've been calling you for hours. I was about to file a missing person report. Sarah looked at her husband calmly, noting the genuine panic in his eyes. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I was in the hospital, she said simply, setting her purse down on the hallway table. David's face went white. The hospital. What happened? Is the baby okay? The baby is fine. No thanks to you, Sarah replied. I had stress-related complications from discovering that my husband is under federal investigation for embezzling money and has been lying to me about literally everything for our entire marriage. David opened his mouth to protest, but Sarah held up her hand to stop him. Don't, she said firmly. I know about Rebecca. I know about your pattern of destroying women's lives when they threaten to expose you. I know about the money laundering and the false business records. I know about everything. David. For the first time since Sarah had known him, David looked genuinely afraid. Sarah, I can explain everything. It's not what you think. Really? Sarah walked past him into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Then explain why you've been preparing to flee the country with Jessica, while leaving me to deal with the legal consequences of your crimes. David's face went from white to gray. How could you possibly know about that? Because I hired a private investigator, and he's very good at his job. Sarah said, Marcus Rivera, former FBI agent. He knows how to trace financial fraud and investigate suspicious deaths. Suspicious deaths? David's voice cracked. Sarah, you can't possibly believe that I had anything to do with Rebecca's accident. I don't know what to believe anymore, Sarah said honestly. I thought I knew you, but apparently I've been married to a complete stranger for 10 years. David sat down heavily at their kitchen table, putting his head in his hands. Sarah, I never meant for any of this to happen. The business problems just got out of control, and I was trying to protect us. Protect us, Sarah laughed bitterly. David, you were planning to abandon me and our baby to avoid prosecution. How is that protecting us? I wasn't going to abandon you, David protested. I was going to send for you once I got established somewhere safe. With Jessica, Sarah asked. David's silence was answer enough. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Federal agents want to meet with you tomorrow morning. Are you ready? Sarah typed back. Yes, set it up. Who are you texting? David asked suspiciously. My attorney, Sarah lied smoothly. She was getting better at deception herself. Margaret Torres is helping me understand my legal options. David's expression darkened. Sarah, you need to be very careful about the legal advice you're getting. If you say the wrong thing to the wrong people, you could end up in serious trouble yourself. Is that a threat? Sarah asked. It's a warning, David said. You've been benefiting from money that came from my business activities. If the government decides to pursue criminal charges, they could go after you as an accessory. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. David was threatening to implicate her in his crimes if she didn't cooperate with his plans. The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. I see, Sarah said calmly. So your plan is to either take me with you when you flee the country or destroy my life if I refuse to go. I'm trying to protect our family, David insisted. Our family. Sarah put her hand on her stomach. David, you got another woman pregnant. You were planning to leave me for Jessica? What family are you talking about? Jessica isn't really pregnant, David said quietly. Sarah felt vindicated that Marcus had been right about Jessica's fake pregnancy, but she was curious to hear David's explanation. What do you mean? She asked. Jessica has been lying about being pregnant to manipulate me into leaving you, David explained. She's been pressuring me to divorce you and start a new life with her, but she's not actually carrying my child. And you know this how? Because I insisted she take a pregnancy test at a doctor's office, and the results were negative, David said. She's been faking pregnancy symptoms and lying about doctor's appointments. Sarah stared at her husband in amazement. So you've been destroying our marriage over a fake pregnancy. I didn't know it was fake when I made certain decisions, David said defensively. What decisions? Sarah asked, though she was pretty sure she knew the answer. I may have told Jessica that I was planning to leave you, David admitted, and I may have made some financial arrangements based on that assumption. Financial arrangements like transferring our money to accounts that Jessica has access to, Sarah guessed. David's silence confirmed her suspicion. He had been so convinced by Jessica's fake pregnancy that he had essentially given her access to stolen money. Money that was now probably being used to fund Jessica's lifestyle while David faced federal prosecution. David, do you realize that Jessica has been playing you? Sarah asked. She convinced you to destroy your marriage and steal money from your company. And now she has access to that money while you're about to be arrested. For the first time, David looked like he was beginning to understand how thoroughly he had been manipulated. But Jessica loves me, he said weakly. Jessica loves your money, Sarah corrected him. And now she has it, while you have federal charges and a destroyed marriage. Sarah's phone rang, and she saw Marcus Rivera's name on the screen. I need to take this, she said, walking into the living room. Sarah, we have a problem, Marcus said immediately. I've been monitoring David's communications, and it appears that he and Jessica are planning to leave the country tonight. Tonight? Sarah looked back toward the kitchen where David was still sitting. Are you sure? I have evidence that David booked flights to a non-extradition country under false names, Marcus explained. The flights leave at midnight. We need to contact federal authorities immediately. But David just told me that Jessica isn't really pregnant and that he's realized she's been manipulating him, Sarah said. That could be part of their plan, Marcus warned. David might be trying to convince you that he's staying while he actually prepares to leave. Don't trust anything he tells you right now. As Marcus spoke, Sarah heard the garage door opening. She looked out the window and saw David loading suitcases into his car. Marcus, David is loading luggage into his car right now, Sarah whispered into the phone. Get out of the house immediately, Marcus said urgently. If David realizes you know about his escape plan, you could be in danger. Meet me at the address I'm texting you. Sarah hung up and quietly grabbed her purse and car keys. As she headed toward the front door, David appeared in the hallway. Where are you going? He asked, blocking her path. To get some air, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm. I need to think about everything we discussed. I don't think that's a good idea, David said. It's getting late, and you should rest after your hospital visit. Sarah realized that David was actually trying to prevent her from leaving. The man she had married was now essentially holding her captive in their own home. David, move out of my way, she said firmly. Sarah, we need to talk about this more. David insisted. There are things you don't understand about our situation. I understand perfectly, Sarah replied. You're a criminal who has been lying to me for years, and now you're planning to flee the country to avoid prosecution? David's expression changed from concern to cold. You know, Sarah, you've always been too trusting. It's one of the things I loved about you, but it's also what made you so easy to manipulate. Sarah felt fear creep up her spine. This was not the man she had married. This was someone else entirely, someone capable of things she had never imagined. Let me leave, David, she said quietly. I can't do that, David replied. You know too much now, and I can't risk you talking to the authorities before I have a chance to explain my side of the story. Sarah realized that she was in serious danger. The private investigator evidence collection had revealed that David was not just a cheating husband, or even just a white-collar criminal. He was someone who would do whatever it took to protect himself, including potentially harming his own pregnant wife. As David reached toward her, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She was done being a victim, and she was not going to let David control her future or threaten her baby's safety. The female empowerment legal battle was about to become a fight for her life. Sarah broke away from David and ran toward the back door, her heart pounding as she heard his footsteps behind her. She managed to get outside and around the side of their house before David caught up with her. Sarah, stop! David grabbed her arm roughly. You're being hysterical. Come back inside so we can discuss this rationally. Let go of me! Sarah struggled against his grip, fear giving her strength she didn't know she possessed. I'm not going to hurt you, David said, but his tight grip on her arm suggested otherwise. I just need you to listen to reason. That's when Sarah heard car doors slamming in their driveway. Through the trees, she could see several black SUVs surrounding their house, and men in FBI jackets were approaching the front door. David heard them too. His face went from angry to panicked in an instant. Sarah, what did you do? He whispered. I told the truth, Sarah replied, pulling free from his loosened grip. FBI, open the door. The agents were now pounding on their front door. David looked around frantically, apparently realizing that his escape plan had been compromised. Sarah, you have no idea what you've done. This is going to destroy both of our lives. You already destroyed our lives, Sarah said. I'm just making sure you face the consequences. The FBI agents had apparently decided not to wait for someone to answer the door. Sarah heard the front door being forced open, followed by multiple voices shouting, Federal agents, search warrant. David grabbed Sarah's hand. Please, Sarah, we can still fix this. We can say you didn't know anything about the business problems, but you have to support my story. Sarah looked at her husband, this man she had loved and trusted for 10 years, and felt absolutely nothing but disgust. I'm not going to lie for you, David, not anymore. Mrs. Mitchell. Agent Jennifer Walsh appeared around the corner of the house, her weapon drawn but pointed downward. Are you Sarah Mitchell? Yes, Sarah replied, stepping away from David. Ma'am, we need you to step away from Mr. Mitchell for your own safety, Agent Walsh said calmly but firmly. She's my wife, David protested. We were just having a private conversation. Mr. David Mitchell, you're under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud, Agent Walsh announced, signaling for other agents to approach. As the agents handcuffed David, he looked at Sarah with a mixture of betrayal and fury. You have no idea what you've done, he said again. You think you're the victim here, but you're about to learn what real suffering looks like. Mr. Mitchell, you have the right to remain silent. Agent Walsh continued with the Miranda warning as David was led toward one of the FBI vehicles. Sarah watched her husband being arrested, feeling a complex mix of relief, sadness, and vindication. The millionaire husband downfall was happening exactly as Marcus had predicted, but seeing it actually occur was more intense than Sarah had expected. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Agent Walsh. The FBI agent introduced herself once David was secured in the vehicle. We understand you've been cooperating with our investigation through Mr. Rivera. Yes, Sarah confirmed. I want to help however I can. We'll need you to come with us to give a formal statement, Agent Walsh explained. And we need to search your house for evidence. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? Sarah realized she hadn't thought about where she would go after David's arrest. Their house would be part of the federal investigation, and she couldn't stay there anyway. Too many painful memories. I can call my sister in Dallas, Sarah said. That's a good idea. Agent Walsh agreed. Mrs. Mitchell, I want you to know that based on the evidence we've reviewed, we don't believe you were involved in your husband's criminal activities. However, some of your assets may be frozen as part of the investigation. Sarah nodded, understanding that her financial security was about to become very uncertain, but at least she would be safe, and her baby would be safe. As the FBI agents searched her house, Sarah called her sister Lisa. Sarah, I've been so worried about you after seeing those social media posts, Lisa said immediately. Are you okay? Lisa, I need to come stay with you for a while. Sarah said, David has been arrested by the FBI, and I can't stay in our house. Arrested Sarah. What's going on? Sarah gave Lisa a brief summary of the past week's events, the affair, the SEC investigation, the embezzlement, and David's planned escape from the country. Oh my God, Sarah, I'm so sorry, Lisa said. Of course you can stay here as long as you need to. When can you leave Austin? Tonight, I think, Sarah replied. The FBI agent said I should go somewhere safe while they process the evidence. As Sarah packed a bag with essential items, Agent Walsh approached her with an update. "Mrs. Mitchell, we've arrested Jessica Hartwell as well," she announced. She was attempting to board a flight to Switzerland with over $2 million in cash and cryptocurrency. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. Jessica's escape plan had been foiled, and she would face justice for her role in David's crimes. "Was she really not pregnant?" Sarah asked. "According to medical records we obtained with a warrant, Ms. Hartwell has never been pregnant," Agent Walsh confirmed. "The pregnancy claim appears to have been part of an elaborate manipulation scheme." Sarah shook her head in amazement. Jessica had been willing to fake a pregnancy and destroy a marriage just to gain access to stolen money. "There's something else you should know," Agent Walsh continued. "We've reopened the investigation into Rebecca Mitchell's death. Based on new evidence suggesting she was about to expose your husband's financial crimes, we believe her death may not have been accidental." Sarah felt a chill run through her body. If David had killed his first wife to prevent her from exposing him, what might he have done to Sarah if the FBI hadn't intervened? "Am I in danger?" Sarah asked. "We don't believe so," Agent Walsh replied. "Mr. Mitchell is in federal custody and will remain there. However, we recommend that you maintain a low profile while the investigation continues." As Sarah drove toward Dallas that night, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, she had been a naive housewife who trusted her husband completely. Now she was a federal witness against a man who had deceived her about literally everything. But Sarah also felt stronger than she had ever felt in her life. She had uncovered the truth about David's crimes, protected herself and her baby from danger, and ensured that justice would be served. The affair consequences and wealth loss had been devastating, but they had also revealed her own resilience and courage. When Sarah arrived at Lisa's house in Dallas at midnight, her sister was waiting with a cup of tea and a warm hug. "I'm so proud of you," Lisa said as they sat in her kitchen. "It must have taken incredible courage to cooperate with the FBI against your own husband." "I didn't have a choice," Sarah replied. "I couldn't let him destroy more lives, and I couldn't let our baby grow up with a father who was a criminal." "Have you thought about what you're going to do next?" Lisa asked. Sarah put her hand on her stomach, feeling her baby growing inside her. "I'm going to rebuild my life from scratch. I'm going to raise this baby to be strong and honest and kind. And I'm going to make sure that David pays for what he did to me and to all the other women he hurt." The betrayal justice served was just the beginning of Sarah's new life. She had survived the worst betrayal imaginable and had come out stronger on the other side. Now it was time to focus on her future and the tiny life growing inside her. What Sarah didn't know was that David's arrest had exposed a network of wealthy men who used similar tactics to manipulate and destroy women's lives. Her cooperation with federal authorities was about to lead to one of the largest white-collar crime investigations in recent history. But that night, as Sarah fell asleep in her sister's guest room, she felt peaceful for the first time in months. The truth had been revealed, justice was being served, and she was finally free. 3 months after David's arrest, Sarah stood in the living room of her new apartment in Dallas, hanging ultrasound photos on the refrigerator. Her baby bump was now visible, and she finally felt excited about her pregnancy instead of anxious. The single mother empowerment journey had been difficult, but she was proud of how far she had come. The apartment was small but cozy, located in a safe neighborhood near her sister Lisa's house. Sarah had used the last of her accessible savings to pay the deposit and first month's rent, knowing that most of her previous assets were frozen as part of the federal investigation into David's crimes. "How are you feeling about the trial starting next week?" asked Dr. Sandra Kim, Sarah's new therapist. They were having their weekly session in Sarah's living room since Sarah's mobility was becoming more limited as her pregnancy progressed. "Nervous but ready," Sarah replied honestly. "I want David to face justice for what he did, but I'm also scared about testifying against him in open court." Dr. Kim nodded understandingly. She specialized in helping women recover from financial abuse and betrayal trauma. "Remember, you're not just testifying for yourself, you're testifying for Rebecca and for all the other women who might become David's victims if he's not held accountable? Over the past 3 months, the FBI investigation had revealed the full scope of David's criminal enterprise. He had been systematically targeting wealthy married women, manipulating their husbands into fraudulent business deals, and then destroying the marriages when the women became obstacles to his plans. Rebecca had been killed because she was about to expose the entire scheme. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Rivera. "Federal prosecutors want to prep you for testimony tomorrow at 2 p.m. Are you available?" Sarah texted back. "Yes. How is the case looking?" "Strong. David's attorney is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but prosecutors want him to serve significant time." Sarah felt satisfied that David wouldn't be able to charm his way out of serious consequences this time. The evidence against him was overwhelming, thanks largely to the information Sarah had provided to federal authorities. "Sarah, there's something I want to discuss with you," Dr. Kim said. "You've been through incredible trauma, but you've also shown remarkable strength and resilience. Have you thought about what you want to do professionally once the baby is born?" Sarah had been thinking about that question a lot lately. Her old career in marketing felt like a lifetime ago, and she couldn't imagine going back to the corporate world that had once seemed so important. "I've been considering starting a consulting business to help other women who are dealing with financial abuse," Sarah said. "I've learned so much about recognizing the warning signs and protecting yourself legally. That sounds like an excellent way to turn your experience into something that could help others." Dr. Kim agreed. "Have you talked to Margaret Torres about the legal aspects of starting that kind of business?" Margaret had remained Sarah's attorney throughout the federal investigation and had become both a mentor and a friend. She had helped Sarah understand her legal rights and had worked tirelessly to recover as much of Sarah's assets as possible from David's hidden accounts. "Margaret thinks it's a great idea," Sarah replied. "She's offered to help me with the legal structure and to refer clients who might benefit from that kind of support." As Sarah and Dr. Kim continued their session, Sarah's phone rang with a call from an unknown number. She normally didn't answer unknown calls, but something made her pick up this one. "Is this Sarah Mitchell?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Catherine Walsh. I was David's first business partner's wife. I believe my husband and I were among David's early victims." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. This was the Catherine who had texted her months ago, claiming that David had destroyed her family too. "Catherine, I remember you reaching out before. What happened to your family?" "David convinced my husband to invest our life savings in one of his fake companies," Catherine explained. "When the company collapsed, we lost everything. Our house, our retirement savings, our marriage. My husband committed suicide 2 years ago because he couldn't handle the financial and emotional devastation." Sarah felt sick. David's crimes had led to a man's death, leaving Catherine a widow and their children fatherless. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Sarah said quietly. "I've been following the news about David's arrest," Catherine continued. "I want to testify at his trial about what he did to my family. The prosecutors said they need more victims to come forward to show the pattern of David's behavior." "Are you prepared for how difficult that testimony might be?" Sarah asked, thinking about her own upcoming court appearance. "I've been waiting for this chance for 2 years," Catherine replied firmly. "David destroyed my family and then moved on to destroy yours. He needs to be held accountable for all the lives he's ruined." After hanging up with Catherine, Sarah felt even more determined to see David's prosecution through to the end. It wasn't just about her own betrayal anymore. It was about justice for all of David's victims. That evening, Sarah received a call from Agent Walsh with an update about the investigation. "Sarah, I wanted to let you know that David's attorney has approached us about a plea deal," Agent Walsh said. "David is willing to plead guilty to most of the charges in exchange for a reduced sentence." "How reduced?" Sarah asked. 15 years instead of the 35 he could get if convicted at trial." Sarah felt conflicted. Part of her wanted David to receive the maximum sentence possible, but another part of her wanted to avoid the stress and publicity of a lengthy trial while she was pregnant. "What do you think I should do?" Sarah asked. "That's ultimately your decision." Agent Walsh replied. But I will say that 15 years is still a significant sentence, and accepting the plea deal would guarantee that David goes to prison without the risk of an acquittal at trial. Can I think about it overnight? Sarah asked. Of course, but we need an answer by tomorrow afternoon. That night, Sarah called Lisa to discuss the plea deal option. What does your gut tell you? Lisa asked. My gut tells me that David deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison, Sarah replied. But my practical side tells me that 15 years is still long enough to ensure he can't hurt anyone else, and it would allow me to move on with my life without the stress of a trial. What about the other victims like Catherine? Lisa asked. Don't they deserve their day in court too? Sarah hadn't thought about that perspective. Catherine and the other victims had been waiting years for justice. Did Sarah have the right to deny them the opportunity to face David in court by accepting a plea deal? As Sarah lay in bed that night, she felt her baby kicking for the first time. The little flutters in her stomach reminded her that she wasn't just making decisions for herself anymore. She was making decisions for her child too. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The plea deal is a mistake. David has powerful friends who will help him get out early. Don't let him avoid a public trial. A friend. Sarah stared at the message, wondering who had sent it and whether it was credible. Did David really have connections that could help him reduce his sentence even further? Was accepting the plea deal naive? As Sarah finally fell asleep, she realized that despite everything she had been through, she still had one more crucial decision to make. The choice between accepting David's plea deal or forcing him to face a public trial would determine not just David's future, but the futures of all his victims. The financial independence after divorce was just beginning, but Sarah's fight for justice was far from over. Tomorrow, she would have to decide whether she was ready to face David in court one final time, or whether she was willing to accept a compromise that might not fully serve the cause of justice. Little did Sarah know that David's powerful friends were more dangerous than she could imagine, and that accepting the plea deal might be the only way to keep herself and her baby safe from threats she hadn't even discovered yet. Sarah sat in the federal courthouse, 6 months pregnant and wearing a navy blue maternity dress that made her look both professional and strong. After a sleepless night of deliberation, she had decided to reject David's plea deal. Catherine Walsh and the other victims deserved their day in court, and Sarah wanted David's crimes to be exposed publicly so that other women could recognize the warning signs of financial abuse. The courtroom was packed with media, federal agents, and family members of David's various victims. Sarah saw Catherine sitting in the front row, flanked by her teenage children who had lost their father to David's manipulations. Margaret Torres sat beside Sarah, providing both legal support and emotional strength. The prosecution calls Sarah Mitchell to the witness stand, announced Assistant U.S. Attorney James Morrison. Sarah walked to the witness stand, very aware of David's eyes following her every movement. This was the first time she had seen him since his arrest 6 months ago. He looked thinner and older, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of his usual expensive suits, but his eyes still held the same calculating coldness that Sarah now recognized as his true nature. Mrs. Mitchell, please tell the court about your marriage to the defendant, Attorney Morrison began. For the next 2 hours, Sarah testified about David's systematic deception, financial manipulation, and emotional abuse. She described how he had isolated her financially, hidden assets, and used her pregnancy as a weapon in his manipulation tactics. The courtroom was silent as Sarah detailed the affair with Jessica and David's plans to flee the country. Mrs. Mitchell, were you aware of your husband's business practices during your marriage? Morrison asked. No, I was not, Sarah replied firmly. David deliberately kept me ignorant of his illegal activities while using our marriage as cover for his crimes. When it was time for cross-examination, David's attorney, Richard Blackwood, tried to paint Sarah as a willing accomplice who had enjoyed the lifestyle funded by David's crimes. Mrs. Mitchell, you lived in a $1 million house, drove expensive cars, and wore designer clothes, Blackwood argued. Are you telling this court that you never questioned where that money came from? Mr. Blackwood, I believed my husband was a successful tech entrepreneur, Sarah replied calmly. I had no reason to suspect that our lifestyle was funded by stolen money. But you benefited from that stolen money for years, Blackwood pressed. I was deceived for years, Sarah corrected him. There's a difference between being a victim of fraud and being a willing participant in fraud. As the cross-examination continued, Sarah felt her baby kicking strongly, as if responding to the stress of the situation. She put her hand on her stomach and felt a surge of protective strength. She was fighting not just for herself, but for her child's future. The trial continued for 3 weeks, with testimony from federal agents, forensic accountants, and multiple victims of David's schemes. Catherine Walsh's testimony was particularly powerful as she described finding her husband's suicide note that blamed David for their family's financial destruction. On the final day of testimony, David himself took the witness stand in his own defense. Sarah watched him try to charm the jury with the same manipulation tactics he had used on her for years. I made some poor business decisions, David testified, but I never intended to hurt anyone, especially not my wife or the mother of my child. Attorney Morrison's cross-examination was devastating. He presented evidence of David's systematic targeting of vulnerable families, his attempts to flee the country, and his pattern of using romantic relationships to manipulate women into providing access to their husband's assets. Mr. Mitchell, did you kill your first wife, Rebecca, to prevent her from exposing your crimes? Morrison asked directly. Absolutely not, David replied, but Sarah could see sweat beading on his forehead. Rebecca's death was a tragic accident. An accident that occurred 2 weeks after she hired a divorce attorney and began investigating your financial activities. Coincidence, David insisted. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning with a verdict guilty on all counts. David was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was read, David turned to look at Sarah one final time. Instead of remorse or sadness, his expression was pure hatred. He mouthed words that Sarah couldn't hear but could read on his lips. This isn't over. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine despite the victory. Even facing decades in prison, David was still trying to intimidate her. After the trial, Sarah returned to Dallas to rebuild her life and prepare for her baby's arrival. She started her consulting business, Empowered Survivors, helping women recognize and escape financial abuse. The business grew quickly through referrals from Margaret Torres and other attorneys who specialized in domestic relations. Sarah's daughter, Emma Rebecca Mitchell, named for David's first wife, was born healthy and beautiful. Sarah chose to keep her married name as a reminder of her strength in surviving David's betrayal. But she legally established herself as Emma's sole guardian with no paternal rights granted to David. For 2 years, Sarah's life was peaceful and fulfilling. She built a successful business, raised her daughter with Lisa's help, and even began dating Marcus Rivera, the private investigator who had helped expose David's crimes. Their relationship developed slowly and was built on mutual respect, honesty, and shared values, everything her marriage to David had lacked. Sarah felt like she had finally created the life she deserved. Emma was a happy, healthy toddler who brought joy to everyone around her. Sarah's business was helping dozens of women escape abusive situations. She had found love with a man who valued her strength and independence. That's when the first threatening letter arrived. Sarah found the envelope slipped under her apartment door on a Tuesday morning while Emma was napping. Her name was written in block letters on plain white paper, with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. Your husband's conviction was just the beginning. The organization he worked for is much larger than the FBI realizes. You cost us millions of dollars, and we don't forget debts. Stop helping other women or face the consequences. Sarah immediately called Marcus, who rushed over to examine the letter. This is a credible threat, Marcus said grimly. Sarah, we need to take this to the FBI immediately. Agent Walsh met them at the FBI field office that afternoon. She examined the letter with concern. Mrs. Mitchell, we suspected that David might have been working with a larger criminal organization, but we were never able to prove it. Agent Walsh explained. This letter suggests that his associates are still active and consider you a threat. What kind of organization? Sarah asked. We believe it's a network of wealthy men who systematically target and destroy families for financial gain, Agent Walsh replied. David may have been just one member of a much larger conspiracy. Over the next several weeks, Sarah received more threatening letters and suspicious phone calls. Someone was clearly monitoring her activities and didn't want her business to continue helping women escape financial abuse. Marcus hired additional security for Sarah and Emma, but the psychological pressure was intense. Sarah felt like she was being hunted by invisible enemies who could strike at any time. Then, on a Thursday evening while Sarah was giving Emma a bath, her phone rang with a call from the federal prison where David was incarcerated. Sarah, thank God you answered, David's voice said when she accepted the collect call. I'm calling to warn you. You're in serious danger. David, I'm not falling for your manipulation anymore, Sarah replied and starting to hang up. Sarah, wait. This isn't manipulation. The people I was working for are planning to hurt you and Emma. You have to listen to me. Despite her better judgment, Sarah stayed on the line. What people? There's a network of men who've been running these financial manipulation schemes for decades, David explained urgently. I was just a small part of it. When you exposed me, you cost them a lot of money and brought federal attention to their operations. If that's true, why are you warning me? Sarah asked suspiciously. Because Emma is my daughter, David said quietly. I may be a lot of things, but I don't want my child to be hurt because of my mistakes. What do you want me to do? Sarah asked. Stop your consulting business, David urged. Stop helping other women. Disappear for a while until the heat dies down. I'm not going to stop helping women just because your criminal friends are threatening me, Sarah said firmly. Sarah, you don't understand how powerful these people are, David warned. They have connections in law enforcement, in the judicial system, everywhere. They can make you disappear and make it look like an accident. The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in shock. Was David telling the truth about the network? Or was this just another manipulation designed to control her behavior? That night, as Sarah tucked Emma into bed, she noticed a car parked across from their apartment building that hadn't been there before. The car had tinted windows, and Sarah couldn't see who was inside, but she felt like she was being watched. Sarah called Marcus to report the suspicious vehicle, but by the time he arrived, the car was gone. Sarah, I think we need to consider relocating you and Emma, Marcus said seriously. If David is telling the truth about this network, staying in Dallas might not be safe. As Sarah considered Marcus's suggestion, she realized that her fight for justice might be far from over. David's arrest and conviction had apparently only angered a larger group of criminals who saw her as a threat to their operations. But Sarah had learned something important over the past 3 years. She was stronger than she had ever imagined. She had survived betrayal, financial ruin, single motherhood, and federal testimony. She wasn't going to let anonymous threats force her to abandon the women who needed her help. Looking down at Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib, Sarah made a decision. She would continue her work helping other women, but she would also prepare for whatever dangers lay ahead. If David's criminal associates wanted a fight, she was ready to give them one. The next morning, Sarah received a package with no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a note. This contains evidence about the network your husband worked for. Use it wisely. The fight is just beginning. A friend. As Sarah inserted the USB drive into her computer, she realized that her story was evolving from a personal revenge tale into something much larger. She was about to become a key player in exposing a criminal organization that had been destroying families for decades. The Empowered Woman Stands Strong ending was just the beginning of Sarah's real mission. With federal authorities, Marcus's investigative skills, and her own hard-won strength, she was going to make sure that no other woman would have to endure what she had been through. But as Sarah opened the first file on the USB drive and saw the scope of the criminal network she was up against, she realized that the most dangerous part of her journey was just beginning. The betrayed pregnant wife had become a threat to some very powerful and dangerous people, and they weren't going to give up without a fight. The sequel was writing itself, and Sarah Mitchell was ready for whatever came next.